Wolves were missing in Yellowstone National Park for almost 70 years, and in their absence, the park changed dramatically. This is the story about bringing those wolves back to Yellowstone and how the park changed again. Just to give you some scale here, how big a park we're looking at. This is it, tucked, that black blob up there in northwestern Wyoming, and it spills a little into Idaho and a little bit into Montana, but mostly in Wyoming. But I put my home state of Connecticut superimposed on Montana there just to show you that Yellowstone National Park is about half the size of that. It's huge. And we're talking about large ecosystem changes that took place over a very large scale. That's what we're looking at. Now, getting into this, I'd first like to take a look at our objectives. Why are we looking at this? This paints such a beautiful story and ties into probably all 8 of our objectives for this unit, but I want to highlight a few of them in particular. First one, we're going to look about how the non-living stuff, the abiotic and the biotic, the living stuff, influence an ecosystem. And in the absence of the wolves, there were dramatic changes to both the biotic and the abiotic. We're going to describe the role of competition and how predation play with that in shaping the communities. All of those populations of various things, plants, animals, and everything really changed in the absence of the wolves. And lastly, we're going to look at biodiverse ecosystems we know are more stable, more resilient than less diverse ones. And Yellowstone without wolves, Yellowstone with wolves paints a very clear picture there. All right, let's get on to this. Yellowstone National Park was the world's very first national park, established in 1872. And in Yellowstone National Park, primarily in the northern areas of the Lamar Valley, we have the largest collection of large-scale carnivores like mountain lions and bears and wolves. And we have the largest herds of prey animals, the ungulates like bison and pronghorn and elk and deer. Wolves were hunted to elimination in 1926. And they were brought back in 1995. And in their absence, the park changed again dramatically. And we're going to look a little bit at that. Why do we get rid of the wolf? It is a beautiful creature, and it has a lore, though, that kind of vilifies it. And if you just look not very far in your storybooks, you find lots of examples of that. Little Red and that big bad wolf. I'm going to blow your house down, says the big bad wolf. And originally, when the park was established, you could hunt whenever you wanted. You could go there and go on a hunting brigade. And after a while, they said, hey, let's protect our large herds of bison and elk and stuff. No more hunting of those inside the park boundaries. There's still plenty outside. But if you want to hunt carnivores, you can. The kind of thought was, if we want to maintain our herbivores, those large herds, we got to get rid of the things that might be killing them, namely wolves. Did people shoot mountain lions? Sure. Did they shoot bears? Sure. Mainly it was the wolves. They were hunted and trapped to extirpation, which means locally extinct. And then in the 90s, a researcher named Bill Whipple from actually Oregon State University and one of his grad students, Eric Larson, were looking at the Yellowstone River Valley, and they were doing some research out there. And these beautiful whitish trees, they're not birch, they're aspen. They said, what is going on here? They're looking at these trees, and they aged these trees, and all these trees were 70 years or older. Makes no sense. It's a weird thing to see so many older trees, but nothing in the middle or young age. Now, aspen do not generally reproduce by flowering and having seeds, and the seeds get planted, fall to the ground and grow. They usually shoot up new shoots. Sort of like if you have blackberries or raspberries in yards, and then poop, 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 the canes kind of pop up elsewhere. That's how aspen and related trees frequently reproduce. In fact, looking at that field of aspen there, they could all be related to each other from a single parent tree at some point in the past. And they noticed that since the 1920s, only 5% of these new things had come out. Why not? Let's go back in time and figure out what was going on 70 years ago. Bingo! The wolves were gone. And they have stark differences between before and after. And on the left here, we can see researchers standing there, a bunch of trees, older trees, nothing younger around him. Now, after the wolves are being reintroduced, there's the guy hiding down on the left-hand side there. And then we've got the new growth coming up. You can see that. Likewise, on the right-hand side, on the top, you can see the barren riverbank, a couple of trees standing there, but nothing big, nothing middle size in there. Again, in the bottom right, you can see the after. Once we brought the wolves back, we have vegetation along this riverside. Now, you might be thinking, that makes no sense, Davies. What do the wolves have to do with the greenery? What are the wolves' relationship to the trees? That's the story we're going to tell. That's the story that we're going to look at. All right? And it is something we discovered here, and it's called a trophic cascade. All right? Trophic cascade, an ecological phenomenon triggered by the addition or removal of top predators and involving reciprocal changes in the relative populations of predator and prey. Blah, oh my goodness, what a mouthful, Davies. Yeah, it is. But it says a basic thing. Look, man, if you take out a top predator, there is a downstream effect. Dominoes kind of fall, boom, 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 boom. And they have these unintended effects across the entire ecosystem, both biotic and abiotic. The nutrient cycling even. It's crazy pants. Let's look at how this works. All right. You remove a top predator. Boop. Put a little X over our wolf. Wolf gone. All right. Now the wolves again, their predominant prey are elk. Elk are big creature like a horse with antlers. Take the wolves out, and now all of a sudden, this causes change to others. And all of a sudden, boom, I got an explosion of elk. Whole bunch of elk. All right, elk do what elk do, and they wander around eating. It's sort of like when the cat's away, the mouse will play. Well, the elk got to go, woohoo, nobody's chasing us anymore. We can be big in numbers. And that had downstream effects, domino effects, cascading effects through the ecosystem to other creatures. Now, again, the bottom right, those are not wolves, those are coyotes. And yes, related, and they come back into our story much later towards the tail end. But we'll look at that. Downstream cascading effects. And those cascading effects continue all the way down through the ecosystem to the non-living stuff, the abiotic stuff itself. In the absence of wolves in the top right, you can see how the rivers were affected when we have erosion because there are no plants by the stream sides. You get more sedimentation into the river, and then the river can fill up with all sorts of a whole strain of different small size and big size granules, and then the little bugs that would have laid and lived in the bottom of that, the benthic bugs that would have lived in the bottom of that river, they get choked out by all the small things, and then without them, you've got being silted over, you've got no fewer fish because the fish don't have the bugs to eat, and the river course itself even changed. That is the idea of a trophic cascade. All right. And so biologists working with the Endangered Species Act, because wolves were endangered in the lower 48, they've been hunted and trapped to extinction in the lower 48, we want to bring them back. There is no larger park in our country than Yellowstone National Park in the lower 48. Let's put them back there. They used to be there. Look, we're seeing effects. Let's check this out. So they went up to Canada, and out of numerous packs, this was like a 2-year process, they hunted wolves, not with guns, but with tranquilizers, and collected wolves from numerous packs. One reason being, well, it's just frankly really, really difficult to try to capture every wolf out of a pack. And the second reason is that by gathering wolves from various packs, they were going to have a more diverse, there's that word again, biodiverse at the gene level. The genetics of these creatures would be more diverse if we had a wider array of wolves. And so they captured wolves, and over the first 3 years, they brought 41 wolves down to Yellowstone National Park. The predominance of them in the first year, and then a few more, and then a few more. And they brought these wolves down, and it was a soft release, which means they didn't just open the door and let these things go. They created a couple of acre-plus enclosed pens that the wolves, with a recurved fence at the top that you can see, so they couldn't jump up and out because they can jump and climb. And they even went 4 feet down so the wolves couldn't climb, burrow underneath, and go out the bottom. And they let them be accustomed to the park, to the sights, the sounds, the smells, the place, and get a feel for it and get settled from that long transport down from Canada. And they left them in these pens for about 10 weeks. And they would bring them roadkill and feed them on a regular basis. And the wolves started to establish their hierarchy and their packs within these pens and whatnot. And then when it came time to release them, all right, at first the wolves are like, we're not going out that door. Because wolves are really skittish of people, almost to a T. And they knew where the people came and went and dropped the food off. And so they didn't want the wolves to become habituated. So they would, kind of put it into this container, let the wolves find the food, never hand feed. And they didn't want the wolves habituated to people. But the wolves knew the people were at that end, and when they opened the door, they didn't want to go out. They actually had to go around to the back side of the pen where the wolves were hanging out and cut the chain link fence and create a new door for them. And then, boom, the wolves ran out into Yellowstone Park. They had been absent for 70 years, and now they were free. And for the first time, you had wolves running free and howling in Yellowstone National Park. And now we're entering early spring. And they dispersed, and you've got alpha males and alpha females, and they established themselves and tried to run and claim territory. All right. Excuse me. And you can see here, and this is down the line once things had started to shake out, you can see there are a number of wolf packs across Yellowstone, but the predominance of them are in the north and the west of Yellowstone. And that is because in the north, in the northeast and the north across towards the northwest gate is the large Lamar Valley, River Valley, and that's where that large concentration of elk and deer and bison are all concentrated, and that's where the wolves shake out. And you can see their boundaries overlap. What happens when they overlap? There's competition, and they get into scraps with each other, and they try to defend territory. And a bigger territory doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bigger pack and a stronger pack. Maybe it means they're pushed to the margins and they need a bigger territory just to find enough food. They got to travel farther. Maybe 8 Mile there, which is yellow on the left and orange on the right, is a small pack because they got everything they need there in a small space. There's plenty of food. There's plenty of place to raise their young. They don't have to run far. They might have to defend it because it's really good territory, but that's what they have. Now, the one I want to point out here is Molly's pack. That's the big red blob on the right. Most of the elk are in the lower altitudes and up in the river valleys there in the north of the park, and that's where then for most of the wolves went. But you got to find your own space. You got to spread out. You can't stay where there are other wolves because there's competition for a resource, a scarce resource, prey. And Molly's pack early on found the higher altitudes, which got snowier, but those wolves have basically snowshoes for feet, and they do not sink in that far. They took to hunting bison, and to this day, Molly's pack is known for specializing in prey that really no other wolf packs go after. Maybe it's not the smallest space. They have to roam a little farther to find what they need, but they don't have competition for that prey. It's really kind of an interesting little subset there. Now, funnily enough, wolf populations went up over the first decade of them being there. And a lot of hunters and ranchers were worried that they were going to get out of control, but biologists knew that they wouldn't, that it would shake out. In 2005, there was a parvovirus, which killed most of the pups. It went back up, and then it dropped when mange got in there, a disease they were worried about. But pretty much since then, it's been pretty steady. All right, and this is what we're going to look at is, now that we've stabilized, what is going on in the park? We went from a high of 170 wolves and 16 packs to down to now about 100, 110 wolves and in about a dozen packs. Let's explore that in video number 2.